Have you ever just looked at a map of the world with almost 200 countries and wondered, how does this whole thing work? Seriously, there's no world government, no single boss in charge. So who makes the rules? Who enforces them? Well, let's dive into the fascinating field that tries to answer those exact questions. Okay, first things first, we've got to clear something up. When you see international relations with capital letters, IR, we're talking about the academic study, the theories and tools we use to understand the world. But when it's lowercase international relations, we're talking about the actual stuff you see in the news, the conflicts, the treaties, all the real-world drama. We're going to use the tools of big IR to make sense of the little IR. So, what is the single biggest challenge, the one core problem that international relations is trying to solve? Well, it all comes down to one powerful and honestly a very misunderstood concept. To get our heads around the system, we have to start with the main character on the world stage, the state. Just think of it as a country, right? It's a piece of land with a government that is, at least in theory, the top dog within its own borders. Pretty much every other player, from big companies to charities, has to operate inside this world of states. Now, every state has a special kind of superpower. It's called sovereignty. And this is the key. It means that no one from the outside has the legal right to tell a state what to do. It is the final authority in its own house.
So, here's where it gets really interesting. If every single state is sovereign and there's no authority above them, then the entire international system exists in a state of anarchy. Now, hold on. This does not mean chaos and mayhem. In IR, anarchy just means there's no world government. There's no global 911 you can call when things go wrong. And if there's no global emergency service, what's the result? Well, the world becomes what we call a self-help system. At the end of the day, every state has to look out for number one. Survival is the name of the game, and that means you've got to rely on your own strength and resources. Now, countries have been dealing with each other for thousands of years, going all the way back to ancient Sumerian city-states. And the modern system we live in really kicked off in 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia. But here's the wild part. The formal study of all this, the discipline of IR, is super new. It was only founded in 1919, basically born out of the wreckage of World War I, with the desperate hope of figuring out how to stop it from ever happening again. So that brings us to our analytical toolkits, the different lenses we can use to make sense of this crazy world. Let's start with the oldest and maybe the most famous one, realism. Realism offers a pretty stark, no-nonsense view of the world. In an anarchic, self-help system, they say international politics is basically just a constant struggle for power. For a realist, power isn't just something you want, it's the only thing that guarantees your survival. And this idea has some seriously deep roots. You can trace it back to the ancient Greek historian Thucydides, but it was really shaped by modern thinkers like Hans Morgenthau, who thought it was all about human nature, and later Kenneth Waltz, who argued that it's the system itself that forces countries to compete for power. And nobody captured the realist spirit quite like Niccolò Machiavelli. His advice for leaders was simple. You need to be both a lion, so you can scare off the wolves, and a fox, so you're clever enough to spot the traps. In other words, a good leader has to be willing to use both brute force and cunning to protect their state. Realism's tough-as-nails view of the world didn't just appear out of nowhere. It really grew as a reaction to more optimistic theories, people we now call idealists, who believe that things like international law and morality could actually prevent war. An idea that, seemed to fall apart pretty spectacularly when World War II broke out. But hey, not everyone buys into that grim, power-hungry worldview. The next toolkit we're going to look at, liberalism, sees a much more hopeful path forward, one built not on constant conflict, but on cooperation. The core idea of liberalism is that even in anarchy, states aren't just doomed to fight all the time. They can actually build a more peaceful world by working together, especially through big international groups like the United Nations, and by promoting shared values like democracy. This kind of thinking goes way back to philosophers like Immanuel Kant, who first pointed out that democracies just don't seem to fight each other. That idea later inspired leaders like U.S. President Woodrow Wilson to create the League of Nations, hoping that institutions could get countries to talk out their problems instead of fighting them out. Okay, so we've got a world of power politics versus a world of cooperation. But what if the rules of the game aren't set in stone? That brings us to our third toolkit, constructivism, which kind of blows up the assumptions of the other two. This next idea is a real mind-bender, and it's captured perfectly in one single powerful sentence from the theorist Alexander Wendt. He said, "Anarchy is what states make of it." So what in the world does that mean?
Well, it means that anarchy doesn't automatically have to equal a dog-eat-dog world. For constructivists, our world is shaped by our shared ideas. Things like national interest or even the idea that anarchy is dangerous, those aren't facts of nature like gravity. They are ideas that we as humans have created. And if we created them, guess what? We can change them.
All right, we have just unpacked three very different, very powerful ways to understand how the world works. Let's pull back and put them side by side to really see how they stack up. Let's break it down one more time. Realism sees the world as a high-stakes chess match, driven by a raw struggle for power. Liberalism sees it more like a complex web, where everyone is connected through shared interests and cooperation. And constructivism, it sees the world as a story that we are all writing together, where our shared ideas and beliefs actually shape the plot. None of them is the one right answer, but each gives us a really valuable way to look at things. So, the next time you turn on the news and see a big global story breaking, a new treaty, a trade war, a climate summit, ask yourself, am I watching a chess match, a tangled web, or a new chapter in a story being written? Which one of these toolkits helps you make the most sense of what's really going on?